Hello, fellow sharks. My name's Tanner, and if you're not familiar with me, I teach math. And usually I'd be over in the math department, but right now I'm in my office. So, basically, I've been really stressed, and things have kind of been crazy. And I'm pretty sure that's the same for everybody. And this whole itsLearning rollout has been anything but smooth. And to be clear, that's not a criticism about the platform. It's just the reality that this was a ton of information to get at once, and we're already stressed about the fact that we have to teach online anyway. So the more I've looked at itsLearning, the more I felt like the way some of the information was presented just wasn't particularly helpful. Which is not to criticize the 2 hours plus worth of trainings that we sat through, because I don't think they were bad. I just think that 2 hours worth of training right now was and is still rough for any of us. And so I think some of us left feeling pretty good, like, okay, we kind of understand how to use the platform some. Some of us left confused. And then you had people like me that had already been using the platform and had already figured out how to do most of the stuff they showed us, that left going, why did they explain it that way? So again, not a criticism of the platform. I want to make that very clear. I actually really like it, and I think all of you should too, once we get over the initial hurdles. The focus of today's video is going to be resources, plans, and learning paths. I'll do learning paths at the very end. Some of you may not care to hear about that. And I'm going to do resources and plans to begin with. So let's get started. You'll see here I've got all my courses pulled up. I'm going to go into Algebra 1 Collaboration, because that's kind of what my sandbox course has become. That is where I am putting all the information that I may or may not put over into my courses. Whenever you launch your course, it brings up the overview page. So just to kind of frame this, this is supposed to be a snapshot of your class. So like, this is what's happening today and this week. Because of that, you've got your announcements, you've got events that might be scheduled on the calendar, you have follow-up tasks, which are kind of a reminder that, hey, you haven't checked these submissions from your students. And then up here on mine, you see this plans feature. And I just wanted to point out that plans can be assigned whenever you want to. You can assign them today. You can assign them to start 4 weeks from now. But as far as the overview page is concerned, if it's dated in the future, it's not pertinent information right now. So if you're looking in your course and you do not have plans showing up on your overview page, it's very likely because the plans are dated to start in the future. So the course is saying, that's not important right now because that's not right now. That's in the future. If you notice up here, I have mine starting August 11th in this sandbox and ending August 22nd. Today's August 14th. So we fall in that date range. So it's showing up here as something that I would need to do. And before I move on, just remember you've got the sticky note over here, and you should probably use it, because announcements are going to come and go depending on what you say. Events are going to come and go depending on the date. Same plans, depending on what's going on, how far in the course you've progressed, something different will be there. But this is always the same. So I use my sticky note to put my email. I used it to put the Galileo password, just in case somebody needed it. I also used it to put USA Test Prep's question of the day, because that's what I'm going to be using for warm-ups. And I also decided to start putting links that I thought they'd be using frequently here. So in this case, I've only put Delta Math. We're going to use that probably for some formatives. And instead of just being like, hey, go to the website, they can click the picture. If you want to see how I created this little sticky note over here on the side, I actually made a separate video for the math department specifically, talking about this question of the day. But it's on YouTube, and I can share that as well. Just let me know. So moving on, I'm going to go over to resources really quick. And I just think it's best to think about itsLearning with this as your start point. I know in some of our training, we went into plans first and we started creating different plans, and it started putting folders in here depending on what was created over there. And then we come over here and it's like, look, you've got all these folders, and it just got confusing. And basically, this is what you need to know. Resources are basically the same thing as like Google Drive. Whatever you put here is what you are saying is going to be part of your course. So if you want to build a lesson, it makes sense to go ahead and have your resources in place. Yes, you could start building a plan over there, and there are ways to input resources over there from your computer. But what I'm suggesting is, instead of doing that, you should probably think of it more as, this is all my resources. This is what I want to make sure is in my course. Once I know I've got the resources I want for a lesson, we can organize them together and create a lesson. And that frame of mind is particularly important when it comes to learning paths, which I think really threw a lot of people off, because learning paths don't really make sense from the context of plans, but they make perfect sense when you think about resources. So again, I'll talk about learning paths at the end. But basically, you can come over to resources, you can click add, and you can add any of this. Notice that you've got resources up here and you've got activities. Well, that confused people too, because it's like, I just clicked resources and now I've got resources that are literally labeled resources, and I've got activities down here. What's going on? And basically, this just speaks to the fact that you can use itsLearning by itself, or you can use itsLearning in conjunction with other platforms like Google, like, I don't know, maybe Pear Deck or something like that. In my case, I'm probably going to be using Edpuzzle in the class. So like, that's an external, website that I'm going to include in itsLearning. Technically, though, you could build a course entirely in itsLearning. And if you did that, everything up here that you put in your course would be like the content you want them to consume. And everything down here that you put in your course would be whatever you're assessing them with. You can create assignments, you can create discussion questions, you can create tests, tasks. I can do more videos talking about the differences and all of these if you would like, just let me know. But I don't have time right now to make a video for each individual piece. So if you have specific questions, I'm happy to answer them as best that I can. But right now, just realize this is where you add everything to your course. Depending on how you're styling your course, some of this is going to be useful and some of it's not. I think adding folders is pretty self-explanatory. You can use that to help organize yourself. Adding links is kind of interesting because you can actually embed entire web pages that way into your itsLearning. Pages are nice because essentially that's like adding almost like a web page that you're building yourself into your platform. And so on and so forth. But again, if you're only going to use itsLearning, then that means you're going to build your tests in here, you're going to make your assignments in here, and they're only going to be in here. If you are going to use other platforms, well then there may be a situation where like the assignment doesn't really show up on itsLearning. Or there might be a situation where maybe some of these resources up here link them to that outside information. And so just as a quick example, and I don't want to get technical here because there's lots of stuff you can do. But hypothetically, I could make a test, make it multiple choice, give it to the kids and say, answer these questions. Over in Google, I can do the exact same thing with Google Forms. If I make a test in itsLearning and put it in this class, then that is within itsLearning. It'll get graded if it's multiple choice and I've assigned the answers. I may have the short answers to grade myself. I grade it, students get their grade back, puts it in the grade book, syncs to PowerSchool. Awesome. Well, I don't know about y'all, but this feature, until they update it, which they said they're going to do, is kind of rough to use. Google Forms is a lot easier. Well, if you want to use Google Forms, there's no way currently to have a Google Form graded and it immediately update the grade in itsLearning. So if you want to use Google Forms, you've got to sit back and think to yourself like, okay, how do I want this to be presented to my students? Do I just want to give them resources? Like, here's something to read. Like in the case of algebra, maybe I'm making them read like, what is algebra? And then maybe I give them a Google form that assesses what we just talked about. Well, you wouldn't need to use anything down here for a Google form. You could just stick it on the page that you gave them. They could answer it, they'd be done. The difference is, by using something like Google, their information is now out there in Google. It's not here in itsLearning. So I just wanted to make that clear. I think that was confusing a lot of people, and basically it just speaks to how fully customizable this is. But that's just a lot of information to process at once. And there are some unique things you can do to kind of let your Google Classroom type materials, your Google G Suite resources like your forms and your docs, there are some things you can do to make them kind of integrate with your course a little better. And in the future, there may be more integrations because there are ways that itsLearning can kind of merge with Google that haven't really been added yet. So if you have questions about like, well, maybe how do I try to get my grades in itsLearning even if I'm using Google, feel free to ask and I can just talk about some of the things we're doing in the math department. So now that I've talked about resources, just realize basically you're building your Google Drive. Anything and everything you were using over there that you were, using as part of a lesson, put it in here in your resources. And anything you put in resources, that essentially means that you are planning or thinking about using it in one of your courses. Now we go over to the Plans tab. If memory serves me correctly, this is where we started in most of our trainings. And I think a big piece of information was missed with some people. And that is, these are literally your lesson plans. Say that again. These are your lesson plans. I think what's different here is that your kids are actually going to be able to see your lesson plans. It's like you're making a lesson plan, you're giving it to the students, they engage with the lesson plan and can complete materials that you've put in that lesson plan. I think that's the best way of thinking about it. In some of our trainings, though, what they started showing us here did not look the same because they had gone on and customized some things that are not standard, and I wanted to point that out right now. So, when you first come in to your plans, if you have a bare bones course, it gives you the option to add topics. Notice mine says add unit. I'll show you how to do that in a second. It gives you the option to add topics. Think of those like as your individual units or as, parts of your classroom that you want to keep separate from each other. You can add them. And then within each topic, unit, you can add different plans. So notice here I have a plan. This unit is called Welcome to Digital Learning. It's not actually a math unit. It's not unit 1. Like, I'm not doing math right here. So I didn't want to put this assignment in unit 1. This is like welcome to the class, parent information, stuff like that. That's what I have in here, but I still want them to do it. So I create this lesson here, and I have to decide like what I want that to be. This is a lesson plan, but do I want it to be one day? Do I want it to be a whole week? Those are things you're going to have to ask yourself. I would think that most people are probably going to cut it up into manageable chunks, like I don't know, like, the lesson is something that I can assess. So maybe you don't want it to be like lesson 1 and be the whole month's worth of material. Anyway, you have to choose what you want your date to be. That's part of it. The other part of it's this. This date range is when this lesson shows up. We already talked about that earlier on the overview page. But the resources that you put in it can have different dates. And if the dates of the resources fall outside of the plan, it's going to throw up like an error type symbol. So basically all I'm saying here is, if you make your lessons one day, well then this would reflect that one day. But then you've got some issues because you want your resources to fit within that. So you'd have to let your resources be that one day. And you just kind of need to think about this as a block of material. It's my lesson plan, probably for the week, maybe for 2 weeks. I'm going to set the date range that I want this sort of material to be open, and then I'm going to put assignments within it. A lot of people, I feel like, we're missing that this is literally going to be our lesson plans. Like, that is why standards get added in here. That's why you've got description. That's why you've got the day. That's why you've got like which plan it is. But some of these words started getting tossed around and people were getting confused. And, I just wanted to emphasize here that this is what you are building to say these are my lessons. This is what you are building to present to your students. And this is what they're going to interact with to go through their course. It's their plans. But personally, I don't want them to have to come to the plans tab every time and start scrolling through trying to figure out what plan they need to do. And because of that, you need to make sure your dates look good so that over on the overview page, their plans actually show up in the order that you want them to do it. Before I kind of end talking about plans and move over into learning paths, I did want to show this to people. First and foremost, if you start adding units and you don't like the order, you can click the little drop down arrow over here and it gives you the option to move up. No, you can't move anything down. Don't know why. But you can, and no, you can't drag it around, even though that would be easier. But you can move stuff up. So keep that in mind. If you don't like the order, you're able to move anything up by clicking the little arrow over here. And if you want to start tweaking how this looks, if you don't want this to say add topic and you want it to say add unit, well then you come over here to your little dots and you go down to plan settings. So there's lots of information in here. I could see different teachers using some of this in different ways. Like, when do you want to activate your plans? Manually, when it starts, 2 days in advance, a week in advance, so on and so forth. And again, that's just going to be personal preference. I'm going to go down here really quick though and point this out. Topic fields. So if you remember, you had add topic, which basically we just said that's like our units. I changed the title. This originally said topic to unit. And then I added a new field and put unit notes. I just want to come out of this really quick and show you what I mean. So when I changed topic to unit, it made this say add unit. And whenever I added unit notes, it put this on every single unit that I added. And that just gives me the ability, to type and leave comments about the unit. Like if there's something I want the students to keep in mind, if there's a resource I want them to be able to grab at any time with any of these lessons that I put in there, then they can refer to that. I'm going to go back into where I was, go up to the dots, go down to plan settings. But notice you can keep adding fields. You don't just have to have unit notes there. And not only that, but you could actually put standards there And you could choose whether or not only you see it or both of you see it. So like if you wanted that to be more of a space where you reflect on how the unit went or something, you could just do teacher. And I think this is where the district's probably going to push out like their template a little bit. There's probably going to be some things in here that they don't want you changing. Meaning there's probably at least going to be like a bare minimum, this is what you need to do. But nonetheless, you at least see where you've got a little bit of flexibility. If we come down to plan fields, this is where some of our presenters' plans look different than ours. So most of this was already filled in. It already said plan, it already said date, class hours, description, standards, resources, and activities. To clarify, everything I'm showing you here is what shows up across the top anytime you add a lesson in, anytime you add a plan in to one of these units. So you can change what you want to show up at the top of this table. Again, there's probably certain norms that we're going to have, but one thing that I did, because I saw this in one of the videos, is I added a field and put teacher notes at the end and literally changed it so that only the teacher could see it. Why? Because now I can leave feedback there like, oh, this was a disaster and this is why, or oh, this went really well and this is why. And you can add more fields. They did mention in one of the meetings also that some people like to have resources and activities separate. I've got mine as one because I don't want them having to look at any more than one column. But technically you could add a field. Notice drag and drop works here. And technically I could be like activities. I want it to show, and I can change this to just say resources, save it. And now when I pull up this plan, resources, I still have what I had assigned, but now I have an activities column and I've got my teacher notes column. Again, I was just going to keep mine the same. So I'm going to come back in here. I'm going to get rid of, this is how you can delete a field over here. I'm going to get rid of activities. I'm going to go back to resources and make it resources and activities again. Again, over here is whether or not you want it to show up. And this is, sorry, I just realized, so there's actually even a field in here that they had off that was automatically in here, like for class hours. So you could turn this on and then let everybody see it, and technically you could put class hours on there as well. But again, this just kind of shows you that you've got some flexibility, and whatever you want showing up in your lesson plan, either for everyone or just for you, you can do. All right, so this went longer than I wanted it to, but I kind of want to just give you a thorough understanding of what that plan was meant to be. And now I'm going to talk a little more about learning paths. Okay. Learning paths are awesome because they give you a start and a finish for the students. It gives them a specific order that they have to go in, and you can mix and match different sorts of resources in there. The thing about a learning path, though, is that it's meant to be something that you assign the students at one time. And I mean, like, think in computer terms here. Like, literally, I am assigning this learning path once. That's why when you come to resources and you go to add, it gives you the option to build a learning path, because that effectively becomes their assignment. What kind of confused people, though, is like that learning path is this really robust trail of different stuff that you can get the kids to do, which means you could put tests in it. You could put pages in it. You could put a discussion in it, surveys in it, a link to Google Classroom if you for some reason wanted them to go look at Google Classroom because you were still using it even though you're not supposed to be. More realistically, a link to like Google Forms or Google Docs, or just individual files that you might want them to look at. The problem is that if you've started adding resources into your course, once you make a learning path, it like grabs those resources and sticks them in the learning path. And you can't use them for anything else anymore. That is why in our training they were talking about, if you make a plan and you decide you want the plan to be a learning path, you really need to copy the plan first. And that was a really backwards way of looking at it, because really you should be making the learning path before you ever even make the plan. Because again, the plan is just your lesson plan. It's just your framework. The learning path is the collection of resources that you want them to use in a specific order. So like over here in resources, I would literally add everything I want them to look at. Look at this slides presentation. Look at this assessment. Look at, this discussion post. And then I would put them all together. So for example, I just want to show you, let's see here. Where do I have some resources on here? Darn, I thought I actually had some resources on here, but let's just look here. I got my parent survey form. All right, let me just I'll just make something just for fun. So let's see. I'm gonna take a step back. I'm gonna click resources, click add. I'm just gonna make a folder really quick just to kind of keep this path together. I'm just gonna call it demo. I'm gonna save it. Folder's empty. Awesome. Now I'm gonna add some stuff into the folder. Again, this is still in resources. I just made a little folder so that nothing gets confused like with everything else I've got in here. I'm gonna go in this folder and now I'm just gonna put stuff in the folder, just like Google Drive would work. All right, let's see. Maybe I want to make, a page. Add content block. I'm going to do rich content. And I'm just going to say, do this first. This could be anything you wanted it to be. Like you can embed stuff. You could actually give them a question, whatever. Read me. All right, cool. So I did this. Now I'm going to go back to my little demo folder here, and I have a new page, which I forgot to title. So again, you can click the title up here, and I'm just going to put introduction. Go back to resources, go down to this little folder. Now I have introduction. So literally that could be a page where you just like put the introduction. Well, look, now I'm going to add something else. And maybe I add an assignment, something they got to do. Watch this video and respond. Okay, here I could literally like click embed, and it says like paste a URL. So like watch this. Go to YouTube. Make sure I'm on my Chatham one. That way nothing. Yeah, whatever. No matter what I do, it offers weird stuff. We'll do the press event. Sure. We're going to let our students watch this. So I'm going to copy this URL up here. Come back over here to where I was in my course. And where it says paste URL, I'm just going to paste that. And look, it's the video. Insert it. And now, whenever they come into this, they'll see it. You could also attach files down here. This is where you could attach like different Google Docs. You could attach any kind of PDF you might have. And this would all be stuff within this assignment. And you've got lots of stuff over here that I'm not going to talk about right now, but basically you could say whether or not it's homework. You could give it a deadline, etc., etc. I'm just going to create this so that it's there. All right. So again, all I'm doing right now is just adding resources. Introduction, watch this video and respond. Now I'm going to add another resource, and I don't know, maybe I want them to do a discussion after they watch the video, and I don't know. How did that make you feel? Save. So again, it's just a discussion post. How did that make you feel? All I'm doing right now is adding these resources in. And you don't actually have to put it in a folder. I mean, like, you could just do add right up here, and it would just be adding it here. But I wanted it organized, so I made a folder first, called it demo, and then I put everything in here. Once you put this information in a folder, or once you put it in resources, that's where you kind of like have to decide what you want to do with it. And what I mean by that is, do I just want to put this in my plan, like in my lesson plan, as individual pieces, and just let them kind of go through it and do it in whatever order? Or do I want them to actually watch it, do it in a specific order? That's where the learning path would come in. So if you wanted them to watch it in a specific order, or complete these particular assignments in a specific order, you could create a learning path. If for some reason you wanted to keep these available to kind of just like put out individually and also have a learning path, well, then you would have to, that's where like you would have to make a copy. And the way you would do that, like I could click I don't know, this one for example, and I can go to action and I can click copy, and I can just copy it to the same folder here. And now look, it's in here again. So maybe I'll just call this watch the video and respond to. So again, go back to resources, go back to demo. And now, because I copied this, it shows up in here twice. The reason why you might want to do that is, all right, I'm about to connect all these resources, but I want to keep this out just in case I need to, like, I don't know, maybe assign it to like one specific student and only this. Or maybe like if you have students that have accommodations or something, maybe you don't want them to do the entire path. Anyway, you can click all these now. I want these to go together into a learning path. Come up here to the top, make learning path, and it brings you into a learning path. So, introduction. Notice if they view it, they go to the next step. Watch this video and respond. You can put if completed or if submitted. And what you pick would just, I mean, again, that would just depend on what that was and what you were wanting them to do. If it's actually a graded assignment, there are ways you can do this so that they can't actually move on unless they pass it. So like if you put a test here, for example, they can't move on unless they pass it. And that makes, they'd actually be stuck though until you graded it, unless it was like multiple choice. So there's different things you can do. And maybe I don't want there to be a step 4. And okay, so, and honestly, see, this is something I didn't quite realize. Because I made that folder, it wants to put everything in that folder into this learning path. So notice here, it's like, all right, you can delete this step 4, which is that copy I made, and we'll get rid of it. Or you can just move it out of this folder really quick, which is what I'm going to do. I'm going to click move, and I'm just going to stick it in, just the course in general. So now you have this learning path. You can click complete. And up here you have to pick, not visible to students. You click that, it is visible to students. Now when you come back to resources, instead of having a folder called demo, you have this learning path. What gets a little bit confusing is technically that's not the only way to make a learning path. You could come up here and click add, and you could click learning path now. And now it just brings you here, and then you could just pick and choose the resources. But so like that would be a way of getting around having to make a folder to begin with, which I think would be okay right now when you first start making the course. The only reason I did the folder version first is because I'm thinking like into the future, and if you've got a bunch of different resources floating around, you don't want to be digging through your Google Drive or digging through your course trying to look for whatever it is you want to put in this learning path. So to me, it just makes more sense. Create a folder. This is this path that I want them to complete, which in effect might be everything they do for your lesson plan that day. I put everything in this folder that I want them to do. I make it a learning path. It's done. That's just a way of like trying to help keep it organized. And real quick before I sign out of this and I conclude, now that we've almost gone 40 minutes, I'm going to just show you what an actual learning path that I made that I'm going to use looks like. So I'm going to go to student view, which by the way, you can click this to go to student view. And actually, I've already done it with the student view. I want to see what guest looks like. Okay, so that's interesting. So like as a guest, they just, and which should be the parent view, by the way, they just see that there's something there. The student sees that they actually have a path to do. They click start, and see it says it's complete because I've already done it as a student because I wanted to see what it looked like. But I'm going to click open, and I'm just going to go back to the top. So this is my learning path. I actually made a presentation. Once they have viewed this, they move on to this video that I made. I used Edpuzzle to make the video. So again, this is where I used an outside resource. They have to watch the video and actually answer questions along the way within the video. That means it will be graded technically, and it will be out in Edpuzzle. It won't be in itsLearning. That's okay. But once they have watched the video, it allows them to move to the next part. Well, this is a parent survey that I want the parents to do. This is where I'm going to collect all their information. I didn't do anything, excuse me, anything really fancy here. I just made a page as a resource, and I went to embed, and I just put a Google form in. So now, once they complete this, they go on to the very end, which is an actual discussion question. It says, welcome to the class, and I put, use this space to introduce yourself to the class. If you're not sure what you want to share, consider the following. I just gave them some potential prompts. I gave them specific requirements. I told them it would be graded. And down here, again, because I've viewed it as a student before, I had to pretend to make a post. So that's why you see the subject as blah down here. But hopefully this helps, and hopefully this kind of shows you, the differences between resources and plans and the learning path specifically. And I think just in quick summary, plan's your lesson plan. The plan is your lesson plan. The plan is your lesson plan. Think of it that way. Resources are everything you're putting in your course. Learning paths are a way to emphasize specific resources that you want them to follow in a certain order. So instead of having to assign individual resources, 5 or 6 of them, and stick that over into your lesson plan, you can take those 5 or 6 resources, make one path out of them, and just assign the path. moving into the future, y'all, there's a lot of potential with this, because you could actually set it up so that, like, if they fail a test, they have a next step in the path. If they pass the test, they don't. So, like, if you're using something like USA Test Prep, it could be, if they fail the test, which, by the way, they wouldn't know until you put their grade in, well, they're not done. So maybe, like, their last step in the path is to go do remediation. If they pass the test, they get to skip and go on and be done. So these learning paths actually have a lot of potential when it comes to differentiating and, like, providing services to different students. We just got to get there. So hopefully you found this video helpful. Sorry it went 40 minutes. I'm going to try to note, like, where the learning path discussion starts. That way people that just want to skip through the video can use the parts of the video they want to. Hopefully you found this helpful. If you got more questions, let me know. Yeah, otherwise, take care, guys.